The story I want to tell took place in London, and I would have been 4 years old. And Don and Anna Ruth were in London. Don was studying something in preparation to go to Tanganyika. And we were on our way to East Africa, our family. And again, I was 4, and my parents went out in the town of London one evening, and Don and Anna Ruth more or less babysat. And I was also with my brother John, my sister Anna Kath. And Don told me, it's taking a long time to get to the point, but Don told me a bedtime story, and it was Jack and the Beanstalk. And I had a nightmare. And I cried and cried and cried. So much for my introduction to Don and Anna Ruth. But later, Bumangi, where they were first stationed, there's a photo that Anna Ruth gave me, I think at the memorial service for my brother Joe. And she is carrying me, African style, on her back. It goes back to the Bumangi days. God bless Don and all that he meant to everyone. Thank you.
I'm Dan Wenger, a stepbrother to Dan Schenk. My parents were Ray and Mary Wenger, stepfather Clyde Schenk. My story is much, much later in history. Don, by this time, was overseas secretary for the mission board. Tanzania Mennonite Church was in the process of getting a second bishop to assist Bishop Kisari. The ordination was set, and Paul Landis, representing the conference, and David Thomas and their wives, and Richard Detweiler made the trip over to attend this ordination. I could tell a story about going to get to it, but I want to get to the main part here. Don Jacobs was there in his role as overseas secretary, but the designated bishop did not show up for the service. And I think, if I have it correct, Don was asked on the spur of the moment to preach the sermon that morning in the absence of the expected bishop designate. And he did, and he preached from Revelation on seeing the Lamb. And that stuck with me. I don't remember, I've heard Don speak a number of times, but there's the way in which he presented his message of seeing Jesus as the Lamb of God there in the middle of the throne, in front of the throne and so on. It left an impression on me. Consider him.
Mr. Stutzman, we drove up from Harrisonburg, Virginia this morning. It's a great joy to be here, actually, to see so many people that were part of that mission movement in the 70s and 80s that somehow I just think was sort of the highlight of our lives in many ways, the connection with the EMM and Don Jacobs. So our career with EMM started one day when Mim Book talked to my wife and I and said, you should come in and look at some openings that EMM has. And she told us about Yugoslavia, where Gerald Sarashenk actually went. We got, Yugoslavia would be a great place. So we walked in. Don invited us to his office and almost immediately said, you need to go to Germany. And we had not even thought about Germany before. And by the time we left, he had pretty much persuaded us that Germany was the place to go. I just share that partly because we were talking about the full circle thing today. Joseph, who led everything, was one of the people that came to faith in our assignment in Munich. And so we meet here at Don's funeral, and it's just like a blessed experience. I also have said about Don, he was our supervisor, our what they call it, mission administrator. And what I really liked about Don is I hardly even knew that. He would come and entertain us and inspire us and everything. but very little direction. He would just give his wisdom once in a while among jokes and things, and it was just so effective.
My name is Lois Baila, and I grew up in Kenya, Africa, and now I live here in Lancaster, so I can say that correctly, Lancaster. The first time, my first encounter with Don I was at Rosedale with my husband. We weren't married at that time, but we were at a conference, and this Mzungu is white man, this Mzungu walks up to me, and he starts talking in fluent Swahili. I grew up speaking Swahili, but for once I was tongue-tied and I couldn't think of any word to say to him in Swahili. So he talked and talked and talked, and I just stood there like, and then when he was done, he left. And then my next encounter with Don was we were living in Thika, in Kenya, and the phone rang, I picked up and I said, "Hello, Bailas." He said, "Oh, it's so good to hear Baila." And he just talk. And "Can we come see you tomorrow? My wife, Anna Ruth, and we want to come visit." I said, "Sure." And so the next day, they made a trip all the way from Nairobi on a bus, and they came to see us. And that just left such an impression of love for us, and just coming to spend the day with us. It was so beautiful to be with them and to just watch Don interact with our kids and with us adults in such a meaningful and wonderful way. And then we moved here to Lancaster, and here was Don again. And this time, he was part of our missionary support team, him and Anna Ruth. And so we had many encounters talking back and forth. But the thing that left an impression for me about Don up to today was the way he would always look in my eyes and say, "Mama, how are you?" And I knew that I didn't have to say, "Okay." I could tell him exactly how I was feeling. So this morning when Galen was talking about him meeting Jesus and Jesus saying, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant," I thought, I wonder if that's the way it went. Or whether Don reached out for Jesus and said, "How are you really doing?"
Hi, my name is Dale Ressler. Don has been very influential in my life. Don was working at EMM when I decided to go to Tanzania. So he was pretty much a very convincing figure in getting me to go in 1973. During the time that I was there, I had many encounters with Don. I also am married to Bishop Kisade's youngest daughter, so I had a very good relationship with Don, because Don and my father-in-law were very close friends. So I could speak to both of them, and I knew that it was all family. Now, over the years, Don has been very influential in the things that I've done, keeping me connected to Tanzania. Very supportive of me when I started the Friends of Shirati organization to help people at Shirati. He always was encouragement that this is a good thing to do to help people that we love together. So I'm always thankful to Don and Anna Ruth for their love for us and their encouragement in our lives as younger people.
David Clemens, Don and Anna Ruth has meant a lot to us over the years that we have known them, and the 2 years that we spent in East Africa. We had the privilege of having their children in our school, being aunt and uncle to them, and it was Don and Anna Ruth who led us through probably the most difficult time in our lives. He preached a funeral for our 2 children, and it was Anna Ruth, Don, who helped us being away from relatives, family. They were our family, and the mission family was there. We have fond memories of
Don and Ruth and the family. I've forgotten an important story. In 1960, Don came to Ethiopia for the annual conference. And there were 30 of us missionaries at 5 different places, and we need to get together once a year to get our batteries charged and be spiritually renewed for our work. And he was the guest speaker at that conference. And he used the story of Naaman, who Elijah told to go and dip 7 times in the Jordan River if he wanted to be cleansed of his leprosy. And so Don was telling this story, and have this guy dip in the river 1, 2, 3 times, checking his skin each time to see if there's any change, making appropriate remarks between. And for 3 times in that telling, he used the name Nathan instead of Naaman. I'd come to that conference very disgruntled and complaining about everything, about fellow workers and about employees and about the mission director who didn't seem to be acting like a mission director. And so he always corrected himself, but the damage had been done. And I knew that I had to dip in the Jordan. I needed cleansing. I went forward for his prayer, and I left that conference absolutely walking on air. It's the best way I can describe the freedom and the lightness that came for me. That was a special memory that I'll never forget.
Hello, I'm Dorka, wrestler, Dorka Kisara wrestler. And I just want to share kind of like a family story between my family in Tanzania. My dad, Bishop Kisari, with my mom, Susanna Kisari. And Anna Ruth and Jacobs were friends. And for me, when I moved to Lancaster County, it was a sense of comfort to know that John and Anna Ruth were in the same place. We didn't always see one another that often, but whenever we saw each other, John will give a big hug, and he will always say, Dorka, your parents, good people. And he will shake my hand and say, you look just like your mom, your parents. And it was often funny to me to hear him say that, because back at the other end, my parents were saying the same thing about them. And a story that I would like to tell is one time before my father passed away, I had gone to visit my family in Tanzania and took my father back because he really loved to travel, and at this time he was aging and he wasn't traveling that much. So I was traveling back to Nairobi to fly back to the United States. And I asked my dad, I said, do you want to travel? He said, well, I'm too old, but he said, where would you take me? I'm like, I'm not taking you to the United States, but I can take you to Nairobi. So we traveled together. I don't know if Anna Ruth will remember this story. And it just happened that Dan and Anna Ruth were at the guest house, Nairobi guest house. And they were visiting. So at the end of the day, we were going at my sister's house. And my dad saw Dan and Anna Ruth. And I said, Dad, we need to go. It's time to go. And he said, no, but Dan and Anna Ruth are here. And I said, yes, they are visitors. And he said, no, I'm sure they're going to want you to go with them to their house. And I said, they can, they're just visiting here. So those are the stories that I have. I have many, but those are the ones that I cannot share because our family was already connected. And one more story I want to share is that when my kids were growing up, and every time we connect or we interact with Dan and Anna Ruth, I used to tell my kids that they did not grow up to see their grandparents. But I said, seeing Dan and Anna Ruth is as close as you're going to get to seeing your grandparents.
David Shank. We were in Somalia, and we needed to move to Kenya. And the Jacobs were here to receive us and to offer us hospitality and help us find the way in into that time of transition. And one of the components I always to give attention to was expanding the ministry of EMF into Muslim areas of Kenya and in regions beyond. So it's a huge area to oversee, to explore, to think about, and so forth. And Don and his cohorts found a little desk for me off to the side of Church House. And so Don is leaving the office now. I said, David, just 2 words of counsel. Do more than what you can. And secondly, whatever you do, handle a piece of paper only once. So I'm commissioned. Do more than what you can do, and never handle a paper more than once. That's the kind of advice you never forget. And about a month into this assignment, I wrote to Don. I said, I've successfully accomplished the 2 points you've made. Now what do I do? He didn't answer that letter. It was a kind of window into why Don was such a prolific doer of so many things. And he opened wide doors for me along the way. More seriously, Don and Anna Ruth have nurtured Grace in me spiritually in so many ways. And the few times that I've heard Don preach, I live with those sermons in my heart year after year. It's a seed planter, a seed that encourages and refreshes. Just original. It's wonderful. Appreciate that.
My wife Lois and I were married in 1965, and as newlyweds went to Tanzania where we knew nobody. But we knew the name Don and Anna Ruth Jacobs, and greatly value the mentoring we received from them. We lived at the secondary school about 4 miles from where Don and Anna Ruth lived, at the church headquarters. Lois worked in the office at the church. I taught in the school. So as good mentors for us, within a few days of our arrival, Don and Anna Ruth invited us over to their home for the evening meal. I don't recall what Anna Ruth served. I do recall, I think we were still at the table, the meal not yet finished, there was a knock on the door. Don went and talked, came back and said, come with me, we need to go to this man's house. It was already dark by this time. The man was in his little house, getting ready for bed, apparently undressing, and he felt something spitting against his leg, and knew, at least assumed, it's a spitting cobra under his bed. Now, how many of you knew that Don Jacobs had a shotgun? Apparently it was known in the community because that's why this man had come to Don for help. Please come with your gun for this snake. So here we are, newbies knowing nothing about the culture or anything, walking in the night, our new mentor with his double-barrel shotgun in the dark, one flashlight for all of us, some distance out to this little village where the man's house was. It was a simple 2-room house. You go in the door of the first room, and then you have to go back through that room to the door of the second room, which was his bedroom. Shining the lights all around, still no sight of the snake. So Don and the man go back to the door to the bedroom, and sure enough, they saw the snake. And Don fired the first load of his gun, and the room was totally covered in dust. This was one of those stick mud wall houses with a earth floor. And Don and the man come dashing to the door, both of them jamming in the doorway. The rest of us are outside waiting. And so we stood there with the light shining through the door to the first room, not the room where the snake had been seen. So we're shining the light, and as the dust settles, sure enough, here comes the snake, obviously, we think injured, at least very disturbed, trying to go up the back wall, and Don fired the second shot, and that was the end of the cobra.
Then I remember Roma worried always that I talked too long, so I cut out my remarks earlier. Now I'm getting a second say three things. You heard Galen Burkholder tell that he was impressed with the sermon out of Wichita in 1978. I was there. He did mention, maybe he didn't know this, but we were going to have a famous speaker from South Africa. Get his name now. Was it Festo? Yes, it was. You're right. Exactly. And he couldn't make it because of transportation problems. So at the very last minute, they asked Don to speak. He had already heard that, and he had planned to have our Roman and me and someone with us to Anna Ruth to have them be with them somehow. And even though Don had just been sprung with this thing, he still, they somehow had us there for an hour or so, right before that big speech, that big talk. Don led us to laugh about a lot of things, but I think the hardest I have laughed in the last 20 years came at his expense. He played golf, his brothers played golf, and whenever Don did whatever it was, he took it so seriously. And so we were there with Don's, Roma's sister's husband, Bradley Otto, and somebody else, a foursome, I guess. And we were at a golf course near where close to, not far from here, and we had to tee off from about the second hole, and right in front of it was a lake, a pond, a little pond, a modest pond. All you had to do was, you know, you would skirt it and go in the other direction a little bit. And Don stepped up to that thing and swung, and the ball actually curved. It curved out of the path it should have gone and went right smack into this pond. Well, I thought that was humorous for Don. I mean, I looked at Don as a spiritual mentor. And he was so disappointed. I thought he shouldn't be that disappointed for an earthly thing like that. But anyway, it was fun. So he wound up again. The second ball did exactly the same thing. And by this time I was highly entertained. So he did another time. He did exactly the same thing the third time. And I have to confess, I fell down on the ground. I couldn't stand. Another thing, I'm going to end on one of Don's failings. He never understated anything. And he had the occasion to be, and Don and Anna Ruth at Roma's in my 50th anniversary. And he took it on himself to say nice things about us. And he did a job. After a while, we were hardly recognizing ourselves anymore. But Roma says it made her feel like she was in heaven. Well, after a while, it started getting embarrassing, and he still didn't quit. And I knew it was out of the goodness of his heart, but I no longer recognized ourselves anymore. Then it got to the point where it was serious, because I thought, you know, if what Don says has no more backing than what he's saying now, what would we trust him to say anything? But at that point, I think we have it on tape yet. And I think the one time I did see it, I turned it off when we got to that point. But the beauty of it was his love. And so it was easy to forgive. Thank you.
I'm John Ruth's better half. And I think the only sibling from the Jacobs clan, of which there were 11 of us. And Don was the nearest in age to me. And so I had 5 brothers that I grew up with. And wasn't always treated very nicely. I don't know that they knew I was a girl. Because I was, you know, 5 boys and then this strange thing. So I was treated much like another boy or somebody that they didn't know quite what to do with. They, as a baby, they left me out in the rain. I don't remember that. But they would take me out so they could play, but they had to take care of this baby, which they knew nothing, didn't know how. So anyhow, they took me to the grove and put me on the picnic table. And so then they played their games, horseshoes or whatever it was, and it started to rain. And so they went in, and Mom says, where's the baby? You know, oops. So anyhow, Don played the part for me that when I was not treated nicely by these older boys, that he was always my champion and he would always make things better for me. So I went to him quite a few times through my life in tears, so love him.